are you going to be the executor of my living will?
You see, you can't let go.
No, no, no. John Farrell with the Farrell Law Firm. Today we're going to review some estate planning scenes in Seinfeld to compare real lawyers with television lawyers. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We put out new videos almost every day. And make sure you hit the like button because, hey, every like helps. John Farrell with the Farrell Law Firm. To tell you a little bit more about myself, I'm the author of Estate Planning for the Modern Family, and I was recently voted one of the top 3 lawyers here in Cobb County, Georgia, along with the law firm being voted one of the top 3 law firms here in Cobb County, Georgia. Today, we're going to review some estate planning scenes in Seinfeld. Everyone knows Seinfeld was a television show in the 90s that starred Jerry Seinfeld as himself, along with an ensemble cast of George, Elaine, and Kramer, played by Jason Alexander, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Michael Richards. It was a show about nothing, as everyone knows. Seinfeld has been in its syndication for many years, and I happened to be watching a rerun the other night, and I was surprised I didn't remember this episode where estate planning comes up. Interestingly, this episode addresses a topic that comes up every day at my office, so I thought it would be good to watch the estate planning scenes along with you and give you thoughts from a real lawyer versus a television lawyer. Let's check it out.
Jerry, you ever seen the movie The Other Side of Darkness?
No.
It's about this woman in a coma. Well, I couldn't finish watching it, so I want you to read this.
I, Cosmo Kramer, having just seen the movie The Other Side of Darkness, and not wanting to be in a coma like that lady in the movie, hereby want Jerry Seinfeld to remove my life support, feeding machine, lung blower, etc., etc., etc.
Can you do that for me, buddy?
Well, I don't know if what you have here constitutes a legally binding document.
Yeah, so it probably would not constitute a legally binding document. So every state generally will regulate these types of things. Here in Georgia, we've got a document called the Advanced Directive for Healthcare. A lot of states have that. They'll call it other things in other states. They may call it a healthcare power of attorney. They may call it a living will. But every state has some version of that document that we call the Advanced Directive here. And the purpose of that document is to make sure that it's legally binding. So the laws require that it has to have a certain number of witnesses in order to be valid. And you could certainly write something up, but I would highly not recommend that because you will want a lawyer to look that over just to make sure that it is a legally binding document, as Jerry insists.
Well, I'm gonna type it up.
Yes, well, of course, but even so, you may want to talk to a lawyer.
Well, Jackie Childs, he put a restraining order on me. I'm not allowed within 200 feet of his office. I couldn't even give him his Christmas present.
Yeah, so Jerry's right. Yeah, he should go see a lawyer. And I know that Jackie Childs, who Kramer typically goes to, has put a restraining order against him and he can't go see him. But I know that New York City is full of lawyers, so he should go see someone else.
Did you take this out of the garbage?
Yeah, it's still got some spring in the strings.
Jerry, this is a piece of junk. How are you going to be the executor of my living will?
You see, you can't let go.
No, no, no. So Kramer has got this wrong. And I'm not going to fault Kramer because he's not a lawyer and he really doesn't know. But the executor and the living will are just two different things. You can have an executor of a will, but in a living will, which is quite different, you have an agent. They're called an agent. The executor of your will is the person who's responsible for carrying out your last will and testament. And they are called the executor. People will all the time come into my office and confuse the last will and testament and the living will. The living will is the document where you describe your wishes and desires regarding the withholding or the withdrawal of life support systems. So you don't have an executor of a will, a living will. You have an executor of a last will and testament and an agent of a living will. But I'm not going to fault Kramer for that because, after all, he's not a lawyer. He might not be familiar with the terms.
Trust me, Kramer, given the legal opportunity, I will kill you.
I wish I could believe you.
So, Seinfeld, Jerry said, given the legal opportunity, he would kill him. Yeah, so again, Kramer's getting this all wrong. So in your living will, in the advance directive here in Georgia, in your living will, you will not grant someone else the authority to pull the plug on you. The living will is where you decide whether the plug is pulled. And so a lot of people are really confused about that. It's not you giving someone else the authority to pull the plug. If you wanted to give someone else the authority to pull the plug on you, you just wouldn't have a living will, and ultimately the courts would decide if they were able to pull the plug or not, or if they were the right person to pull the plug. But that's not what a living will does. What a living will does is it describes your desires and wishes regarding the withholding or withdrawal of life support systems, not granting that authority to someone else. That's just not the way it works.
Hey, Elaine, do you have some free time tomorrow afternoon?
Me?
Yeah, because you're perfect. You're a calculating, cold-hearted businesswoman. And when there's dirty work to be done, you don't mind stomping on a few throats.
Oh, come on.
All right. So Kramer decides to go with Elaine because he thinks she's a cold-hearted businesswoman and she'll be able to stomp on a few throats if she needs to. Well, that's really not what the living will does. And your advance directive for healthcare, it's not what they're really designed to do. You are granting the authority to other people to do certain things, not pull the plug. That's not an authority that you grant to someone else. That's where you will make those decisions and not leaving it at someone else. And that's why the living wills exist, so you can make that decision.
Situation number 4. You're breathing on your own, you're conscious, but with no muscular function.
Well, would I be able to communicate?
I don't see how.
I don't like the sound of this one.
Yeah, let's pull the cord.
Yank it like you're starting a mower.
All right, this is hilarious. So the lawyer, who happens to be Ben Stein, I don't know if you know Ben Stein, but he's been in a lot of television shows and movies, and he's actually in that movie Ferris Bueller. He's the one that goes Bueller, Bueller, Bueller when he doesn't show up for school one day. So Ben Stein, the lawyer here, is going through different scenarios, and he started off saying number 4, so I assume there are other options in there. That's not the way a living will works either, or the advance directive. And so generally there are just a couple of options when it comes to deciding whether you are going to be on life support, or as Kramer says, or as Elaine says, you pull that plug like you're cranking a mower. So they don't get as specific as you have one lung and you're blind, or you have 2 lungs but you can see. And they don't get that specific in those documents, and certainly not the ones here in Georgia. Generally, there's just a couple of options for you to choose from. Here in Georgia, they happen to be a terminal condition and a permanent coma. If you find yourself in either of those 2 situations, or both of those situations, then what do you want the doctors to do? And that's where you make that decision. So they don't get as specific as they do here on the episode, but it's hilarious that they're going through all of these different scenarios saying, well, what do you want to do if you're blind and you have 1 lung? Yeah, they don't get that specific, and you can see Kramer's really struggling with it here.
Oh, Jerry, listen, I saw the rest of that movie, The Other Side of Darkness. The coma lady wakes up at the end.
Oh, I wanted to see that. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
I didn't know it was possible to come out of a coma.
I didn't know it was possible not to know that.
All right, it's hilarious. George saying, why did you say that? I was wanting to watch that movie. Yeah, that happens all the time, doesn't it? Well, in this case, if you remember at the beginning, Kramer said that he wasn't even able to finish the movie because he was just so worked up about what would happen if he was in a coma. But as he watched it, he realized that at the end of the movie, she came out of the coma. Yeah, that's absolutely possible. You see that in the news from time to time. So he's a little concerned, having known that things can change. And let's see what happens.
All right, I gotta find Elaine. She's gonna pull my plug.
All right, so he says he's got to go find Elaine because, she's going to pull the plug. Well, so again, that's not the way that it works. Elaine wouldn't be able to pull the plug, but it's pretty good for television, right? And that's one way that real lawyers and television lawyers, it is just different. So in an estate planning scenario like this, that's not the way that it works. You create a living will that will tell people what you want to have happen if you find yourself on life support.
Outlet.
right. So here at the end, Elaine pulls the plug. Kramer wakes up and he's just shocked. You know, there she is with the plug in her hand, and he knew that she was going to do something like that. So this actually brings up a huge, important topic when it comes to these types of documents. These documents are not set in stone. So that moment when Kramer realized that the lady came out of the coma at the end of the movie, and now he has changed his mind, he doesn't necessarily need to go see Elaine to do that. He needs to go see the lawyer. He can create a new advance directive or a new living will that will override the old one, or it may be necessary for the lawyer to revoke the old advance directive and then create a new one. But it's not something that you'd go to Elaine for. You would go to a lawyer so that they could fix that for you. That's really all we have to talk about today. If you've watched our videos for any amount of time, then you know what we do is we help people plan their estates. To do that, we've created a book called Estate Planning for the Modern Family. You're going to want to get a copy of this book, so I'm putting a link in the description below so you can order it online. It will tell you all about wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and the probate process. It also comes with a bonus. The bonus is if you have trouble sleeping at night, you can read it and it will get you right to sleep, so make sure you read it in the morning. If you want to learn a little bit more about the firm or maybe schedule a free consultation for yourself, give us a call at 678-809-4922. That's 678-809-4922. I'm also putting a link in the description below so you can reach out to us to schedule that free consultation. Alright, that's all we have for today. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because we put out new videos almost every day, and make sure you hit the like button because, hey, every like helps.